The studio lights glared with that artificial brightness that made everything look sharper than it felt. New York's skyline glittered through the glass wall behind the stage, but all eyes were locked on the man in the leather chair at the center. Mike Tyson leaned forward, forearms on his knees, the kind of posture that meant he wasn't just answering questions, he was making statements. The host, a polished man in a navy suit, shifted nervously with his stack of cards. He had asked about rivalries, about Tyson's prime, about the state of boxing today. Then he went for the name that still pulled ratings no matter the decade. "What about Chuck Norris?" he asked, tone carefully neutral. "Do you respect what he accomplished outside the movies?" Tyson's lips curved into something between a smile and a sneer. He shook his head slowly, savoring the moment, and looked straight into the camera lens. "Norris?" he said, dragging out the syllables. "He's an actor, man. Not a fighter. In a real ring, he wouldn't last a minute." The words landed with the blunt weight of a punch. For a second, the audience didn't know how to react. A few chuckled too loudly, the nervous laughter of people unsure if they'd just witnessed disrespect or comedy. Others sat still, glancing at one another, their expressions asking silently, "Did he really just say that?" The host forced a laugh, but it cracked at the edges. He leaned back in his chair, gripping his cards tighter. Then the sound swelled. The studio filled with laughter, sharper this time, leaning into Tyson's bravado. He nodded, playing into it, hands gesturing as if brushing Norris off the table like crumbs. The cameras captured every flicker of disdain. By the time the segment ended, clips were already bouncing through social media. The phrase, "not a fighter," was plastered in bold text above Tyson's face on Twitter. TikTok edits, looping the line with mocking sound effects. The hashtags split instantly. Hashtag fake fighter versus hashtag respect Chuck. Within hours, the internet was a battlefield. Younger fans amplified Tyson's words, posting memes of Norris movie clips with captions like, "Hollywood doesn't hit back." Others responded with footage pulled from archives. Chuck in his 20s, bare-knuckled in karate tournaments, hand raised in victory, sweat dripping onto mats long before the movie posters. "Not a fighter?" one caption read. "Tell that to the men he beat." Talk radio joined in. Morning hosts replayed the line in disbelief, callers chiming in with either outrage or laughter. Sports shows put side-by-side reels of Norris in his prime and Tyson's knockouts, treating it like a pay-per-view fantasy match. The story wasn't just entertainment anymore, it had teeth. Reporters circled quickly. Norris was spotted leaving a gym in Texas 2 days later, ball cap pulled low. Microphones crowded him as he walked to his truck. A journalist shouted the question everyone wanted answered. "Mike Tyson says you couldn't last a minute in a real fight. Do you have a response?" Chuck paused, one hand on the door handle. For a moment, it seemed he wouldn't answer at all. Then he looked up, eyes clear under the brim. A small smile tugged at his mouth, but there was no humor in it. "When a man talks like that," he said evenly, "it's because he's afraid of something." That was all. He climbed into his truck and drove away. The clip hit the airwaves within hours. It was replayed, dissected, quoted. Commentators tried to parse the meaning. Was he calling Tyson insecure, or hinting at something deeper? The lack of explanation only fanned the flames. The internet latched onto the phrase "afraid of something" like it was prophecy. Memes flipped instantly, Tyson roaring on one side, Norris smiling quietly on the other, captioned "noise versus silence." In the days that followed, the divide hardened. Some saw it as a generational clash, others as a test of legacy. Tyson's camp leaned into the bravado, his voice booming in gyms, reporters scribbling down every colorful boast. Chuck stayed quiet. No trash talk, no rebuttal, no defense. Just that one line, echoing louder with each retelling. And so the story didn't fade. It built. The insult had woken something bigger than either man. The world was waiting now, restless, convinced that silence and noise couldn't coexist forever. Just wondering, where are you watching from? Write it down. Bellow. The weeks that followed felt less like time and more like a tightening coil. Every day the question returned in headlines, talk shows, and comment threads. What if Tyson and Norris actually stood in a ring together? It didn't matter that one man's legacy was boxing and the other's was martial arts. The public smelled conflict, and conflict demands resolution. Tyson fueled the fire with ease. Cameras crowded his gym, and he gave them a show. Between rounds on the heavy bag, he grinned and told reporters, "I'd crush him like an ant." You've seen the movies, right? That's all it is. Acting. If he stepped in here, it'd be over before he even knew it started. The sound bites rolled across networks by the hour. Fans in their 20s and 30s repeated his words online, splicing them into clips of Tyson's knockouts, setting them against pounding hip-hop beats. The narrative was simple: iron fists against faded fame. Meanwhile, footage of Chuck surfaced in quieter corners. No reporters invited, no sponsors on banners, just shaky cell phone clips from students at his Texas dojo. He trained without music, without audience. Slow katas on a faded mat, measured breathing audible even over the hum of fluorescent lights. Combinations on a heavy bag that didn't swing wildly, but jolted with precise impact. To outsiders it looked almost meditative, but those who had trained saw the discipline. Each strike identical to the last. The body remembering truths muscle never forgets. The contrast became impossible to ignore. Tyson was fire, brash and consuming. Norris was stone, unmoving, weathered but unbroken. Sports writers leaned into the imagery. "One man's voice fills the room," a columnist wrote. "The other man's silence fills the air." The anticipation grew legs. Casinos in Las Vegas whispered about the possibility of a one-off exhibition, a friendly spar packaged as entertainment but guaranteed to draw millions. Talk show hosts joked that it would be the only fight both grandfathers and grandsons would pay to watch together. But beneath the laughter was a hunger. This wasn't about belts or rankings. It was about legacy, about words that had cut deeper than intended. Social media turned it into a full-blown campaign. Hashtags multiplied. Hashtag Minute of Truth. Hashtag Ant vs. Stone. Hashtag Silence Speaks. One night, a clip went viral of Tyson telling a late-night host, "Man, if we do this, I'll put him down before he even blinks." The audience laughed, but in the comment sections the laughter was less certain. Someone edited Chuck's earlier line, "When a man talks like that, it's because he's afraid of something," and laid it over Tyson's boast. The video hit 10 million views in a day. By the third week, sports networks stopped treating it as fantasy. Panels of analysts debated it earnestly. Boxing mechanics versus karate discipline, age versus endurance, speed versus precision. Betting lines appeared unofficially in back corners of the internet. Tyson was favored, of course, but money poured onto both sides, surprising even the bookmakers. The real push came from the press. One outlet organized a face-to-face in Las Vegas, branding it as a charity-friendly exhibition for the cameras. The term was polite fiction. Everyone knew what it meant. Tyson's grin, when asked about it, confirmed it. Friendly? Sure. Friendly like a lion playing with a sheep. Reporters chased Chuck for a reaction. He gave them none. No insults, no bravado, Just training sessions behind closed doors, short nods when questions flew at him. Silence became part of the show. People began to read into it however they wanted. Some saw fear, others saw composure. Either way, it was louder than Tyson's boasts. In the weeks leading up to Vegas, the split in the audience deepened. Younger fans mocked the quiet with memes of empty dojos captioned "Training in Silence." Older generations responded with stills of Chuck in his prime, victories etched into photographs that looked more like history books than hype reels. The argument wasn't just about two men anymore. It was about eras, about what counted as real, about respect itself. Flights to Vegas sold out faster than for title fights. Hotels advertised special packages with posters of Tyson's scowl on one side, Chuck's calm stare on the other. The Strip was already buzzing days in advance, neon signs competing to plaster their faces across casinos. For locals, it felt like the city was preparing not for a match, but for a storm. And then came the announcement. Official. The friendly spar would take place under lights at the MGM Grand, open to press and fans. It would be 3 rounds, exhibition rules, nothing on the line but pride. Tickets vanished within hours. Secondary markets pushed prices into the thousands. On the night before, Tyson recorded one last video in his hotel suite. He leaned close to the camera, grin sharp as ever. "Tomorrow," he said, tapping his temple, "I'm ending the legend. Watch me break it in 60 seconds." He clicked a stopwatch in his hand, let it run 30 ticks, then snapped it shut with a laugh. "Don't blink." By sunrise, the clip was everywhere. Pundits argued, fans traded bets, the internet howled, and through it all, Chuck stayed silent. Not a word, not a post. That silence had stopped being absence. It was wait. And by the time the arena doors opened, the world knew one thing. Whatever happened next, it wouldn't be friendly. Las Vegas doesn't whisper. It screams in neon, in the thrum of slot machines and the steady churn of voices pouring out of casinos. But that night, the MGM Grand was louder than the Strip itself. Hours before the doors opened, crowds pressed against barricades, some draped in Tyson shirts, others carrying posters of Chuck from movies and old fight photos. The air tasted of sweat, beer, and the faint tang of electricity from the storm of lights overhead. Inside, the arena was a living organism. 20,000 people pulsing with nervous energy. Vendors shouted above the roar, music tracks thundered through the speakers, but beneath the surface was something sharper. This wasn't title hype, not a routine card. It felt historic, an argument about to be settled in flesh and bone. The undercard ended, lights dimmed, and the crowd shifted like a single body. The announcer's voice boomed through the speakers, and then the music hit. Heavy bass, pounding rhythm, the unmistakable swagger of Tyson's entrance. He appeared in a black robe trimmed with gold, gloves already laced, grin sharp enough to cut glass. He didn't just walk, he stalked, shoulders rolling, chin tucked, the posture of a man who had walked into rings like this his whole life. The crowd erupted. Tyson's fans jumped, fists pumping in rhythm. He smirked, raising a hand as if conducting the chaos. Some booed, but even the boos had heat in them, a strange respect woven into defiance. Tyson thrived on it, throwing mock punches into the air, tapping his temple, reminding everyone that this was his domain. He climbed into the ring with practiced ease, ripping the hood back and pacing in tight circles. He slapped the top rope, bouncing on the balls of his feet, radiating restless violence. He mouthed something to the camera, lips curling into 60 seconds, before breaking into a grin. His fans roared again, louder, as though volume itself could guarantee prophecy. Then the lights cut. The music stopped mid-beat, leaving a vacuum that made the crowd murmur in confusion. A spotlight flickered to life at the top of the ramp, and a figure stepped out slowly, dressed in a simple gi, belt tied, barefoot. No pyrotechnics, no booming soundtrack. Just silence, broken only by the shuffle of his steps. Chuck Norris walked with the pace of someone who wasn't entering a show, but a space he had always belonged to. The crowd's reaction was strange at first, an uncertain swell, then a wave, then an avalanche of noise. It wasn't the frenzied roar Tyson drew. It was different, heavier. It came from the gut. People stood without realizing it, pulled up by something they couldn't quite name. Chuck didn't wave. He didn't smile. He looked straight ahead, jaw set, posture calm. He paused at the edge of the ring, bowed slightly, then stepped between the ropes with measured precision. For a second, the contrast was blinding. One man dripping with bravado, feeding on sound. The other quiet, anchored in stillness. The referee called them to the center. The arena leaned forward, phones lifted, the sound thinning into anticipation. Tyson's grin widened. He leaned in close, voice low enough for microphones to barely catch. "I'll break you in a minute." Chuck's reply was calm, steady, and carried farther than it should have. "A minute is enough for you to learn the truth." The crowd reacted like a live wire, gasps, shouts, whistles tearing through the silence. For a heartbeat, it wasn't Tyson's domain anymore. It was a battlefield split down the middle, half roaring for the predator, half holding its breath for the stone that refused to move. The referee rattled off instructions neither man needed. His voice was almost lost in the hum of tension. Tyson rolled his shoulders, bouncing, eyes sharp and hungry. Chuck stood unmoving, hands relaxed, gaze fixed. The timekeeper reached for the bell. The crowd rose. 20,000 people pulled to their feet by something primal. Drinks spilled, chants collided, camera flashes erupted like lightning across the bowl. And in that last breath before the sound, it became clear to everyone watching. This wasn't a friendly exhibition, not a show for charity. It was judgment. Judgment of words, of pride, of what counted as real. The bell was about to toll, and the truth was about to arrive. The bell clanged, sharp and metallic, and the arena detonated. 20,000 people roared as one, a wall of sound so thick it rattled the scaffolding above. But inside the ropes, that thunder dissolved. For the two men at the center, there was only space, only breath, only the coil of energy waiting to snap. Tyson moved first. He didn't ease in, didn't test distance. He exploded forward like a spring released. His gloves tore through the air, fists snapping so fast the microphones caught the whip of leather. The crowd erupted, half in awe, half in panic. His presence alone felt like a storm breaking across the ring. The first hook sliced so close to Chuck's jaw that sweat lifted from his cheek. A second blow thundered into the guard he raised at the last moment, jolting him back a step. The ring itself seemed smaller when Tyson advanced, the ropes suddenly too close, the canvas shaking with each stomp. People leapt to their feet, shouting, pointing, "There it is! That's Tyson!" From the outside, it looked dangerous, even desperate. For the first 10 seconds, it seemed Chuck was on the verge of drowning in raw power. Tyson's arms swung in tight arcs, his chest heaving, his eyes wide with the thrill of violence. Every punch drew gasps, every near miss a surge of adrenaline through the stands. Phones shook in hands, trying to capture the blur. But inside the chaos, Chuck's expression never changed. His feet carried him in small, precise steps, backward, then diagonal, then a pivot to the side. His hands rose and fell as needed, not panicked, not hurried. He wasn't trading, he was reading. His calm looked almost alien against the storm Tyson unleashed. Seconds bled into one another. Tyson barked with each punch, sweat flying from his shoulders, arms pumping like pistons. His fists kept missing by inches, close enough to stir air, close enough to make the crowd believe the next one would land clean. Yet every time, Chuck was not there. A tilt of the head, a turn of the hip, a shuffle of the feet that placed him half a step away from the path of destruction. The tension built higher. The audience stood in waves, fists pumping, some screaming Tyson's name like it could push his punches the extra inch. Others fell silent, struck by the contrast. One man consuming energy with reckless fire, the other conserving it with stillness, his breathing steady as if he were walking a quiet path through a storm. After a furious 30 seconds, Tyson's pace betrayed him. His shoulders rose a little higher, his exhale a little sharper. His mouth opened wider than he meant. It wasn't obvious to everyone, not yet, but those close enough to see understood. Power burns fast. Chuck slipped another right hand, pivoted, and let Tyson sail past him toward the corner. The crowd gasped again, not for the punch, but for the absence of it. Tyson turned quickly, snarling, but Chuck was already centered, his stance intact, eyes calm. The storm had not touched him. The cameras zoomed in, splitting the screen. On one side, Tyson's face, teeth bared, sweat pouring, chest pounding. On the other, Chuck's, unreadable, still as stone. The difference wasn't lost on anyone. The arena shifted. The chants for Tyson grew ragged, swallowed by a wave of murmurs. People started to notice. Chuck hadn't thrown a single strike. Not one. And yet, somehow, he was already dictating the fight. By the first minute, Tyson's gloves hung lower than they had at the start. His breathing came heavier, the bursts of speed still dangerous, but less precise. Chuck's steps grew even smaller, his angles sharper, his calm thicker. Each time Tyson swung, he missed by just enough for doubt to creep in. At ringside, commentators leaned in, voices trembling with excitement. Tyson's throwing everything. Look at that power. But Norris hasn't even hit back yet. He's controlling the pace with nothing but movement. This is something else. The realization spread like fire through dry grass. In the stands, in living rooms across the country, people felt the shift. Tyson was still the aggressor, still the spectacle. But Chuck had already taken the ring without lifting his hand. By the time the round's midpoint neared, the storm of fists looked less certain. Tyson still pressed forward, but his eyes flickered, just for a second, toward the clock. The crowd, restless and divided moments before, found itself leaning toward the silence. Chuck had yet to throw a punch, yet somehow the fight belonged to him. The middle of the round carried a strange weight, as if the fight had already lasted longer than the clock admitted. Tyson's chest rose and fell harder than before, his eyes darting not only toward Chuck but toward the ropes, the corners, the space he was trying to control. He began cutting the ring, herding like a predator narrowing a circle. His steps shortened, his guard rose, his shoulders coiled tight. The crowd sensed the trap forming, and sections of the arena stood, screaming as though volume itself could push Chuck into the corner. Chuck gave ground, but his feet told a different story. Each retreat was measured, small, precise. He didn't stumble. He chose. It looked like concession, but it was more like an invitation. His eyes never wavered, his breathing steady, his stance never unraveling. Tyson snapped a jab, not meant to land, but to herd. Then he followed with a hook, heavy and fast, shoulders rippling with the force that had made his name. Chuck's guard rose, angled, and the hook brushed across fabric instead of jaw. The crowd gasped, some rising in anticipation of the finish. Tyson pressed harder, pressing Chuck's back toward the ropes. For a moment, it looked as if the end was near. Tyson's gloves came alive, combinations flowing. Left to blind, right to crush. Another hook to close the door. Chuck's back heel kissed the canvas just short of the corner post. The roar reached a pitch that shook drinks from plastic cups. And then, silence within the storm. Chuck pivoted, just half a turn on his rear foot, shoulders rotating as if guided by invisible lines. Tyson's glove whistled past his ear, air snapping against the leather. Chuck's lead hand tapped the bicep, redirecting force, and suddenly, the space Tyson had closed was empty. The younger man lunged into a corner that no longer contained its target. The audience released a single collective breath. Gasps, groans, even laughter. Tyson clipped the top rope with his shoulder. His balance shifted, and in that tiny fracture of control, Chuck answered. Not with a wild counter to the head, but with something cleaner. A short punch, two knuckles driven just under the ribs. It wasn't theatrical, but it was honest. The sound, a dull, thudding impact, rippled through the lower bowl. Tyson's body betrayed him. One knee dipped, his breath caught, his torso folded a fraction before pride forced it upright again. The crowd saw it. Everyone saw it. Noise shifted. Chants of Tyson cracked, faltered, and fell into murmurs. Commentators leaned forward, voices trembling. "That landed! Did you see that?" Tyson felt that one. Norris hasn't thrown a headshot, but he's riding the fight with bodywork. Tyson snarled, anger flashing across his face. He marched forward, trying to restore control, fists pumping in heavy arcs. Chuck met each blow with small adjustments. A frame here, a step there, head movement measured like clockwork. Tyson's gloves slammed into guard, shoulder, or empty air. Every miss cost him more. His chest heaved, his arms pumping with less snap, more strain. "Come on!" Tyson shouted mid-exchange, his voice cracking under the microphones. "Hit me!" Hit me for real. The crowd fell quiet for a moment, waiting. Chuck's eyes never changed. He didn't answer. He let Tyson's words hang in the air, unsupported, until they wilted into nothing. Silence spoke louder than defiance. The fight tilted further. Tyson threw a furious combination. Jab, hook, uppercut. Chuck slipped the jab, angled his body to let the hook graze his guard, and stepped just enough to the outside that the uppercut carved air. Tyson stumbled a half step, caught himself, and glared, realizing how much energy had just left his body for nothing. Chuck touched him again. Another short strike to the body, sharp, accurate, placed exactly where lungs struggled to refill. Tyson flinched, this time unable to mask it. His chest rose too quickly, his lips parted, sweat streaming down his temples. The chant began in a single section, tentative. "Nor is. It spread, aisle to aisle, gaining weight. Within moments, the entire arena was thundering his name, thousands of voices pounding into the canvas like drums. The sound rolled over Tyson like surf, drowning his corner's frantic instructions. He tried to roar back, to reclaim the crowd. He pounded his chest, spat toward the neutral corner, bellowed, "I'm still here! I'm still the king!" But the words fell flat against the noise. The people weren't answering him anymore. They were answering the silence that kept turning away his fire. Tyson surged once more, cutting the ring, trying to trap Chuck against the ropes again. His movements were less sharp now, his timing slightly off. He flung another right hand, the kind meant to end fights, but it brushed air by inches. Chuck slid aside, calm as ever, and planted a firm punch into his chest. Straight, direct, a message delivered. Tyson stumbled. Not a collapse, not yet, but his balance faltered. Cameras zoomed in, catching the truth written across his face. The grin was gone, the bravado cracked. Sweat and doubt blurred together under the bright lights. The chant swelled louder, pressing against his ears, against his pride. Norris! Norris! Exclamation mark! It was no longer support, it was judgment. By the time the horn sounded, Tyson was retreating toward his corner, jaw clenched, chest heaving. His coaches rushed to him, barking commands, waving their arms. He didn't hear them. He was listening to his own lungs, to the silence across the ring, to the crowd that no longer belonged to him. Chuck hadn't chased, hadn't forced, hadn't even looked winded. He sat on his stool at the last second, gaze locked straight across, calm as stone. The favorite had shifted. Everyone in the building felt it. The final round didn't start with noise. It started with weight. The kind of weight that presses on the lungs before anything happens, the sense that the room itself already knows the ending is coming. Tyson's corner worked frantically. Ice bags pressed into ribs. Water splashed across his face. His chest still rose too fast. His jaw was clenched tight, as if to lock out the doubt that wanted in. Across the ring, Chuck hadn't moved much. He stood like someone waiting at a bus stop, calm, unhurried. He didn't pace. He didn't shadow box. His breathing came steady, like time itself refused to touch him. For the people watching, 20,000 in the arena, millions at home, the contrast was louder than any music. The referee called them forward. Gloves touched, not friendly but obligatory, and Tyson went all in. He had decided before the bell that there would be no pacing, no patience. If he was going down, it would be with fire. He came out blasting, jab, jab. Then a right hand that cracked through the air so close to Chuck's jaw, the microphones caught the whistle of leather. He followed with a hook, a shovel punch to the body. Another hook. His fists blurred, his feet stomped divots into the canvas. The crowd jumped up, screaming as if the building itself was about to fall. But the storm kept missing the stone. Chuck tilted his head, slipped left, then pivoted half a step out of line. The punches kept finding air, or bone in the wrong place, or a guard that moved exactly where it needed to be. It looked small, even boring, compared to the fury Tyson unleashed, but it was suffocating in its precision. Tyson threw, and Chuck refused to be there, again and again. The younger man snarled, red-faced, veins bulging. He feinted high, then dropped low, trying to grab around the hips and force gravity into his corner. Chuck's hand guided the crown of Tyson's head away. His other arm swam inside, hips turning in one neat pivot. Tyson's arms clamped around nothing, his body stumbling forward a step farther than planned. The crowd gasped, then roared at the sight of the predator missing his grip. Tyson spun back, furious, refusing the script. He barked with every punch now, a guttural rhythm that carried across the arena. "Come on!" he shouted. Fight me for real!" The words were swallowed by the chant that had started again, louder this time, rolling across the stands like thunder. Norris! Norris! Exclamation mark. And then came the gamble. Tyson drove forward with everything left. The kind of charge that made his legend. A hard right, a hook over the top, another right behind it, mean and desperate. He poured it all into the air between them, teeth bared, body coiled with the last of his violence. Chuck let the first graze cloth, redirected the second with his forearm, and stepped inside the third. His own right hand shot straight into Tyson's chest. Sharp, direct, the kind of punch that speaks to breath instead of spectacle. Tyson staggered half a step, arms wide. Chuck didn't waste the opening. His lead foot crossed Tyson's stance. His hips turned. His shoulder brushed the inside of Tyson's arm. His hands took hold, one at the triceps, the other at the wrist. And the momentum wrote the rest. It wasn't a throw. It was a door opening at exactly the wrong speed. Tyson's balance disappeared, and the floor rose to meet him. He landed on one knee, stunned more by geometry than force. The arena detonated. The noise rattled rafters, spilled drinks, knocked people off chairs. Phones shot upward, recording history in real time. On the big screen, the camera zoomed in on Tyson's eyes. Shock first, then realization. Chuck stayed calm. He settled into control, not squeezing, not hurting, just making the truth obvious. His grip said, "I could." His posture said, "I don't need to." The referee hovered, arms ready. Chuck leaned in, speaking softly, but the cameras caught it anyway. A real fighter proves it with self-control. Tyson's chest heaved, then steadied. He tried to twist free out of pride, but the hold stayed like a locked door. After a second, he stopped resisting. The ref waved it off, shouting, "That's it!" The bell clanged, final and absolute. Chuck released instantly. He stepped back, palms open, while Tyson rose to his feet. His gloves dropped to his sides, his face caught between fury and understanding. His corner rushed forward, shouting, waving towels, but he waved them off. His eyes stayed on Chuck. The ovation rolled across the building. It wasn't just cheers, it was relief, recognition, even reverence. People who had argued for weeks found themselves clapping with both hands, some with tears in their eyes. The chant built again, not cruel this time, but thankful. Chuck offered a hand. Tyson hesitated, then took it. The pull to his feet was steady, respectful. Up close, they spoke words no mic could steal. Tyson's lips moved. Respect. Chuck nodded once, enough to end the conversation. The referee raised Chuck's hand for formality, but the building didn't need it. The outcome had already been decided in hearts, not on scorecards. Chuck didn't linger. He touched Tyson's shoulder, bowed slightly to the nearest corner, and lifted one hand waist-high, a gesture without triumph, just acknowledgement. The arena answered with thunder. The aisle opened for him as he left. No security pushing, no ropes. People moved aside naturally, making space as if the silence itself had asked them to. At the tunnel, Chuck paused, glanced back once. Tyson, standing straighter now, lifted his glove in a small salute. Chuck answered with a nod and stepped into the dark. By morning, clips would flood every platform. The pivot, the takedown, the words whispered into a microphone that wasn't meant to catch them. Talk shows would argue. Pundits would spin. Headlines would exaggerate. But those who had been there knew it wasn't about moves or age or even victory. It was about silence, about the way control speaks louder than any boast, and how truth doesn't need to raise its voice. That night, America saw that even the loudest hands fade against the power of a man who refuses to spend more than he must. And in that silence, they finally understood where real strength lives,